The Tao of Self-Confidence, Episode 812. Welcome to the Tao of Self-Confidence, where I share stories of amazing women who have discovered their inner journey to self-confidence. Visit our website at thetaoofselfconfidence.com. Your inner journey to self-confidence awaits. Well, hello, friend. Welcome to the Tao of Self-Confidence, where I share stories of amazing women who have discovered their inner journey to self-confidence. I'm your host today, Sheena Yap Chan, and today is another episode of the Asian Women Who Boss Up edition, and I'm so excited to have this amazing lady today. She is a licensed esthetician and also the owner of Anita Spa. So I really wanted to introduce you to Anita Chan. Anita, how are you today? Maybe you can fill in a little bit more about yourself to the listeners.
Hi, Sheena. I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for having me here. As you mentioned, I am a licensed esthetician. I've been licensed for almost 20 years now, and I am the owner of Anita Spa in San Francisco, California. We've been open for about 5 years. And so my journey really started in the beauty wellness industry, and it wasn't something that I had thought I was going to do, but it was something that I think I'm blessed to have been able to find at such a young age. So excited to share my journey.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. And Anita, what's your cultural background?
Yeah, so I am first generation Chinese American. My parents are immigrants from China, Hong Kong.
Thanks for sharing that. And how does the model minority myth hurt Asian women as a whole?
Yeah, I love that you asked this question because I don't feel that it's asked enough. And just from my own experience, especially in this past year of 2020, I obviously diversity and different cultures have become the forefront of conversation for our country. And it became kind of apparent to me that our country, America, sometimes can just be a black and white country. All other cultures and colors in between never get discussed, even though we are also living through a pandemic or having the same struggles. So for example, like my business, we've been shut down since March. So almost a year now. It's kind of crazy to say that, but there's so many assistance, government assistance, grants and things like that. But it was so geared towards other types of minority businesses. And I know speaking to a lot of friends that are in business, we just kind of felt like we're being left out a little bit, like even though, yes, we understand the need for additional help, but we also are going through this and we also are shut down. So I think sometimes being the minority, the model minority, it comes off that like we don't need that help because we do everything, but we also are living through the same, living in the same world as well. So that's something that really stood out to me recently.
Thanks for sharing that. That's so true. I think people just think all Asian people are successful, but especially during this pandemic and especially with all the hate crimes going on, it's actually hurting us as a whole because people are blaming us for something that we don't even know, right? It's like, I've never even been to China, but yet we become the blame of it because of the color of our skin or our cultural heritage. So I'm glad you're able to share that. And why do you think creating a stronger representation of Asian women is important to you?
I think it's important because I think that education is important. And the more we know, the more we have an ability to make decisions, make our own decisions, especially now, as you just mentioned, this whole pandemic, the Asian community has been taking a bit of a beating, literally and figuratively because of the color of our skin. But also, I'm so excited to see more representation in Hollywood and the media of our culture, but it's a little skewed too, right? So it's a lot of this like whole crazy rich Asian, which is for me, like as being born in America, it's so exciting to see people that I can relate to on TV. But now I'm kind of like, well, I don't know if I can really relate to that because I didn't come from that crazy rich Asian family background. And now it's become, okay, well, that is something that I don't know, is out in space now too. So I do think that it's important to have representation of Asian Americans, people that live day-to-day life that are quote unquote normal and how we succeed and survive.
Thanks for sharing that. And that's so true. As much as I love Crazy Rich Asians, it is like showing one speck of Asian people living a certain way. But like as Asian Americans, we also do have hardships, right? I think this is why I love watching like Korean dramas, because they have every aspect of like what Asians do for a living. And it's like, there's a hardworking Asian, there's the one who's rich, there's the one who's struggling, there's the one who's started as an entrepreneur and is like trying to find herself or himself in that place, or just even working at it for 5-10 years just to get to where they are today. And one of the reasons why I created the podcast was to showcase multifaceted Asian people who are in acting, who have a business, who are in the beauty industry, who are in the makeup industry, who can fly a plane with their feet because they were born with no arms. And I want them to realize we're not one dimensional. We're actually more than one thing. And because we're all different. So I really love that you mentioned that.
I love you mentioned that, and it's so true. And a lot of what I realized as I started doing more and more of these podcasts and sharing my story is what I didn't realize before was how much of my family's journey and struggles, the psyche of where they came from, has been transferred to me and how that's molded me as a person. So I love that you mentioned that, because it's true. There's Asians that come from all facets, right? And a lot of the ones that did immigrate to another country, they're trying to make it work in a foreign country, which in itself is a struggle. So yeah, I just started realizing, like, gosh, my story is so much about my mom when it's supposed to be my story, but it just is, it's a reflection of who I am now.
It's so true. Like our upbringing really does mold who we are. And even though we go through so many struggles, sometimes we realize it's from how we're brought up because it's something that's been passed on from generation to generation. But it's up to us to like break that cycle, right? And so especially in 2021, which is needed now more than ever. So thanks for sharing that. And how does it feel being that representation for so many Asian women in the world?
I love it, and I'm honored, and I hope that I do have that opportunity to be that representation, because I am not a celebrity. I struggle on social media, to be honest. I'm still trying to figure it out, and I'm not that influencer, and so I want to be that representation of somebody who is just either graduating out of college now and figuring out, okay, what will life look like, now that the entire world has changed. Or somebody who, like myself, just started working at 14 and doing my job and moving on and hitting one step at a time so that I can reach my dreams and goals. So that's such an honor to be able to have a platform, and meet somebody like you, where you have this platform so that we can share, so that people can. I'm all about learning through others' experiences. And so I'm honored to be able to do that.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. And I'm grateful you're here today sharing your story, because there's someone out there who can relate to what you've been doing. Because a lot of us did start working at such a young age, right? I remember I asked my mom, can I have like this top? And she's like, if you want it, you have to work for it. And so that's why I decided, well, I guess I have to get a job if I really wanted it. So I can totally understand where you're coming from.
That was my motivation. And I always say this to this day. I'm like, when people ask me like, oh, why did you work at 14 around? I'm like, I just didn't want to ask my mom for money anymore. Like, I didn't want to answer why I needed the money,
Thanks for sharing that. And share one reason as to why every Asian woman needs to read this book.
Yeah, so this book is just, I love the collaboration. And while meeting all the different authors, we all just come from different backgrounds, even though we're Asian, right? So even though we are lumped under the same category, we are all such different people, different women, different backgrounds, different parts of the world. And so I think if anybody really wants to have a desire to really see what others have gone through, the steps that they took, the mistakes that we can learn from others, and achievements, right? So this book just really dives into everybody's story. And, it could be as big as, somebody who owns a law firm, or somebody like yourself who has a successful podcast that is award-winning. So congratulations on that. Or somebody like myself who I think, I'm a small business owner. I have a small business in San Francisco, and so stories that are big and small. I think that it's just important to be put out there. And that's why this book is interesting.
Thanks for sharing that. I know I'm so excited for the book to come out. I mean, I don't see books that highlight 16 Asian women on a cover. And that is super powerful, because growing up, I never had that kind of representation. I'm pretty sure you might have felt the same way, but I wanted to name myself Heather, have blonde hair and blue eyes because that's what I thought being beautiful was. And so I was always ashamed of being Asian. And I didn't want the next generation to feel like they should be ashamed of their own culture. And, just sharing these stories of how we were able to just make a decision to forge our own path is a success on its own, because it's not easy to go out there and do your own thing. And especially as an Asian woman, you have all your friends and family saying, are you crazy? Like, you had this successful job. What are you doing? Why aren't you married? What's wrong? There's so many things that we go through. And sometimes we just have to block out that noise and realize, like, you know what you're doing. Sometimes it might not make sense for everyone, but if it makes sense for you, like, just go for it, right? As long as you're not hurting anybody and you're creating like a positive impact in the world, then go for it. Like, becoming an entrepreneur, someone can see that and be like, if Anita can do it, I can do it. And that's all that it is, right? Like, creating that positive impact.
I can relate to that so much. And I just want to share a really quick story and something that I've been thinking about. So my mom actually never wanted me to be an entrepreneur, even though she herself is an entrepreneur. So I was raised in a family of entrepreneurs, and my mom was so against me having my own business. And furthermore, when I was in college, I wanted to go to university in New York, and I'm the only child. My mom's like, no way, you're not going across the country. But mind you, my mom was raised in when China had the Cultural Revolution. She fled China. She had to jump into the ocean to flee China. And my grandparents allowed her to do something so risky, right? And then she herself started a business. And now, me as her daughter, she never wanted me to do anything that she's experienced. So you're so right. Our parents just put all these restrictions on us, and it just comes from their own fears. But, just figuring out how we can break through that and just build up that confidence to say, I'm just going to forge my own path, like you said.
Yeah. And yeah, I can relate because, parents, I know they do it out of love, but sometimes it's actually hurt us because sometimes we need to know what failure feels like so we can get back up and keep moving forward, build strength, build confidence to go out there and do our own thing. And I know they do it out of, out of love, but sometimes it's just like, that's not how it works, because then we end up being trapped. We don't feel like we're good enough to go out there and do something worthwhile. And so we just have to learn to build our own confidence, build that self-love. And we can do that by, picking up this book or listening to this podcast to realize other Asian women have done it as well. So I appreciate you sharing that story. And what can readers gain from reading your story?
I think readers can gain, or they will quickly realize that I was born a rebel, and everything my mom said to do, I didn't. And everything she told me not to do, I did. So I always say, if my mom tells me to go right, I'll always go left. And so through my story, it's exactly what we've been talking about, is just, first of all, being in the beauty industry. My mom was always like, that's not a career. That's a hobby, and a hobby can't feed you. We don't live off of passion. So how I kind of just try to, even though it's my mom, it's my closest person, and that's where I find safety, but how I was able to compartmentalize that and just really show my mom that like this, I can make something out of this. And then, moving forward, like you said, the expectation of marriage and children, and it's something that us Asians just can't shake off. Like, if it's not our own parents, it's our aunts and uncles and, everybody in the family tree that's going to ask us that. And while I think it's a great thing for the woman that took that path, and I would hopefully maybe one day, if I'm blessed to have that, it just is my story, and I need to learn to be okay with it. And, so yeah, just through my story, I didn't take the linear path at all of what Asians or even American society should, say that I should do. I really jumped around a lot. And so they'll learn how I got there from doing that. And hopefully that will allow people to see, like, oh, they can create their own path. They don't have to climb that corporate ladder. They don't have to follow the map that somebody else put out there.
Yeah, totally. And thanks for sharing that. And I feel you when it comes to like aunts and asking you when are you going to get married and stuff. I mean, a lot of them joke around like, maybe you should go to church so God can bless you with a husband. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I mean, I know they mean well, but sometimes like it does hurt us because it's like, do we really need a man to validate who we are? And I'm not saying, marriage is bad. I think marriage is great if you're with the right person, but to do it for the wrong reasons is a whole other story. I mean, that would be a whole other episode, but I'm glad you were able to share that out. So thanks again.
And my parents got divorced when I was 2. So my mom's a divorcee herself. So can you imagine, she was pushing me towards marriage, even though she didn't have a successful marriage herself. And I love both my parents, but it's just, it's different when you put hopes and dreams onto somebody else and allowing them to live their own journey.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And Anita, where can they pre-order a copy of the book?
Yeah, so I will be having it on my website, anitabeastspa.com, which is my business website. And then, of course, we will do a bit of a social media marketing push on that. So finding me on social media or on my website, you'll be able to pre-order that.
Awesome. And maybe you can share some of the social media links that you have that listeners can check out.
Yeah, so on Instagram, my business link is Anita B Spa. So at Anita B Spa. And then my personal one is at Anita B Beauty. Both of those, you'll be able to find me.
Thanks for sharing that. And to our listeners, if you want to connect with Anita, you can also head on over to the taoofselfconfidence.com and search for her name. Her show notes will pop up along with everything else that we talked about. And I really just want to thank Anita for taking the time today to share her story. We're really excited for this book to come out. And so thank you so much, Anita.
Thank you, Sheena. It's such an honor. And I'm so excited to be able to do this project with you.
Same here. I'm really honored that you're here on the show and that we get to be in this amazing book. And to our listeners, be on the lookout for another new episode of another amazing Asian woman who boss up author share her story. And yeah, tune in to the next episode. And thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in to another amazing episode of The Tao of Self-Confidence. You can order your copy of Asian Women Who Boss Up book by visiting our website at thetaoofselfconfidence.com. Your inner journey to self-confidence awaits.